Today on an all-new Dr. Phil.
I can't imagine being on vacation, then all of a sudden...
Coming home a widow.
You do not believe that your husband died of natural causes.
I believe that somebody murdered him.
All I could think of was that my husband was going to have to identify me, and he wouldn't be able to because there wouldn't be much left.
A daytime exclusive.
The police have come out to say that I didn't really have any injuries, that I was fine.
Today's going to be a changing day in your life. You've never had anybody working harder to bring you to the threshold of change than right now. Well, this is the view you dream of when you head to the tropics for a Caribbean vacation, right? Pristine beaches, blue skies, warm water, and sipping on a frozen margarita. But in the past year, tranquility has turned to terror for some people visiting these idyllic vacation hotspots, these all-inclusive resorts that tourists flock to. Summer vacation is over now, but the headlines still linger. American tourists getting violently ill, dying, and even being physically assaulted.
Mystery in the Dominican Republic. What killed a Maryland couple while on their dream vacation?
At least 8 Americans have died while in the Dominican Republic.
A national alert in Costa Rica after the government says 19 people have died from drinking tainted alcohol.
The series of deaths at luxury resorts have created confusion and raised questions about the island's safety.
Canoeing together.
63-year-old Edward Nathaniel Holmes and his fiancée vacationing in the Dominican Republic late last month. They never returned home to Prince George's County.
The very day they were to leave the hotel, staff found them dead in their hotel room.
Local autopsies concluded most died of respiratory problems or heart attack.
A Colorado couple say they became seriously ill last summer. Kaylin Null says their room began smelling of chemicals. They say they suffered dizziness, blurred vision, stomach cramps, and shortness of breath.
Doctors later suspected the couple had been exposed to chemicals typically found in pesticides.
Tammy Lawrence Daly says in January that she was attacked by a stranger inside the resort where she was staying in the Dominican Republic.
Tammy Lawrence Daly says she went to get a late-night snack when a man in a resort outfit robbed her and brutally beat her, then left her in a maintenance closet. She suffered permanent disfigurement from her injuries.
That last story was Tammy, and she's our first guest today. The news of her attack went viral, and it captivated the nation after she wrote a Facebook post claiming she was savagely attacked while staying at a luxury resort.
The mother in Delaware is emotionally recounting a savage attack. She was nearly killed while on vacation in the Caribbean.
Never in a million years would I ever have thought a trip to the Dominican Republic would turn into an absolute nightmare. After attending a show that evening, my husband and I and our friends ended up walking back to our rooms. Chris was really tired, so he jumped into bed. I, however, was still a little hungry. I decided to go down to the lounge for a snack. I ended up bypassing the first lounge and decided to walk into the next building. As I started to walk, I noticed footsteps behind me. Out of nowhere and without warning, a man pushed me forward. He immediately wrapped his hands around me and immobilized my arms and covered my mouth. I was unable to scream or really move. His grip was that intense. My immediate instinct was to fight back. As I was struggling with him, he let go of my mouth, and at that time I screamed. I heard him say no. And then he wrapped his hands around my throat extremely tight. I knew I was going to pass out. I was completely panicked. I could feel him pulling me. He was dragging me into what I believe is a maintenance room. I knew something bad was really going to happen if I made it in there. I was grabbing the door frame to try to prevent him pulling me into that room. He still had his hands wrapped around my neck. I couldn't breathe. The fear was overwhelming. When I gained consciousness, he was kicking me in the head and beating me, and I thought he was going to bash my head in at that point. The pain was unbelievable, and the blows kept coming. You could feel the rage coming off of him. I must have lost consciousness again, and when I came to, I was on my stomach, and he had wrapped something around my neck and started to strangle me again. All I could think of was that my husband was going to have to identify me, and he wouldn't be able to because there wouldn't be much left. I felt that it was over, it was done. I had no fight left. And I just remember with that last breath, breathing in some water with the air and losing consciousness. I knew I was going to die, and I just gave up.
Well, after being left in a crawl space to die, Tammy was finally found 8 hours later. Take a look.
I regained consciousness and couldn't believe I was alive. I didn't know where I was. It was pitch black. I couldn't see. All I could hear was machinery running. I realized that my eyes were swollen shut. I remember laying on my left side in about 2 to 3 inches of water and rocks. I tried to sit up, and the pain was so overwhelming. My head was throbbing. My nose hurt, my mouth hurt, my bra was hanging off under my clothing. The boy shorts that I was wearing underneath of my dress were slightly down in the back, exposing parts of my body. I was scared. I really felt that I was going to die, and it just killed me because I just didn't want to do that to my kids and to my husband. Later, I ended up hearing voices above me, 2 male voices, and I just started screaming, "Help me, help me." The men ended up leaving, and they ended up coming back with additional people. I was shaking so bad from cold, shock, and I remember I heard women come up, and I could hear them gasping. A woman wrapped a robe around me, and she hugged me, and she said in English, "You're safe, you're safe." At that point, I thought I was going to live. They drove me to the medical unit on the resort. As we pulled up, I heard my girlfriend scream, "Oh my God, Tammy, it's Tammy. Oh my God, is that you?" And then I heard my husband start screaming, "What did they do to you? What did they do to you? Oh my God." I was rushed to the hospital at that point. I can't believe I survived. I absolutely believe this is a miracle that I survived this whole ordeal.
Well, joining us today in a daytime exclusive, please welcome Tammy. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so sorry for what has happened to you then, and I'm actually sorry for what you've had to go through since then, and we'll get into that. But there's a lot to your story that the public just doesn't know. So why did you choose to talk about that now and talk about it here?
Well, I wanted to really tell the story from my truth, my words. I just feel like this is a safe place to tell that story.
Some people have questioned the story or not believed the story. And I've looked at these pictures that were taken at the time. What part of this would anyone question? What's the puzzle here?
The police in Dominican and the resort have come out to say that I didn't really have any injuries other than some bruising on my face and a broken fingernail, that I was fine, that this was my husband that did this, basically telling everybody that we did this on purpose. That this was a scam of some sort? These are some excerpts from the resort's Twitter statement. Showed bruises on her face and had a broken fingernail without presenting any other signs of violence on her body, and still being in possession of her purse, cell phone, and other belongings, disclosed her version of the case 4 months after it happened. There are weak points, contradictions, still unanswered questions in this strange and unusual case. How'd you feel when you read that? I felt horrible. I felt nauseated because I couldn't believe the resort would come out and say that. Their management and head of security showed up in the emergency room that I was in. The head of security wouldn't even look at me because I was so bad.
You think there may have been more than one assailant?
I think so. It felt as if somebody was kicking my head on the left side, but the blows felt like they were coming straight down on my face, so it just felt like there was more than one person.
And I know that you were in an altered state of consciousness or unconscious. Do you have a sense that you were sexually assaulted or no?
When I came to in the, well, I call it the hole because that's what it felt like. One of the things I noticed was some pain, and that was unusual. So I feel that something did happen.
We're going to take a break for a second. Tammy's husband says he feels guilty for his wife's brutal attack. We're going to meet him and find out why after the break.
I immediately felt guilt. I started telling her, I'm sorry, I shouldn't let you go. I look at her and see her physically and how well she healed. But I know she's not okay. She knows she's not okay.
Monday, new clues surrounding the death of Princess Diana.
I said, oh my God, there's a woman in the car. Why isn't anybody helping?
The paparazzi caused the incident. It's provable that that's not the case.
You believe that the police botched this investigation.
I watched a crime scene being destroyed.
This person that was inside that tunnel, he has never spoken about Princess Diana's death until now.
That's Monday. Then on Tuesday.
Show number 3,000! Twins with eating disorders, and they have each gained...
I'm Batman.
Catch me outside, how about that?
Dr. Phil 3000, Tuesday.
Despite horrifying stories coming out of the Dominican Republic, the Minister of Tourism for the island insists the 2.7 million Americans that visit each year are safe, and the island is taking every measure to ensure that. Chris worries he'll never be able to erase the image of his wife's beaten and bloodied face from his mind because he saw her on a golf cart the next morning after looking for her all night long.
The assault that happened to my wife at the resort in Dominican Republic seemed like it happened yesterday. I woke up at 1:45 in the morning and immediately started looking around after noticing she wasn't there. I called my friends. We immediately met and started looking for her. I was getting really scared. By 3 a.m., we talked to the gentleman at the front desk and told him what was going on. The staff was basically saying that maybe she was drunk, passed out somewhere. At 5:30, when the sun started coming up, we started looking again. We still couldn't find her. One of my friends said, let's go to the medical facility to see if they found or heard anything. As we got to the medical facility, a golf cart pulled up and I saw someone getting off of it. And that's when our friend said, hey, that's Tammy's shoes, that's Tammy. Her face was so mangled, her head was swollen, her eyes were shut. I immediately felt guilt. I started telling her, I'm sorry, I shouldn't let you go. I didn't think she was going to survive. Since the assault, I keep blaming myself. 1, not going with her, and 2, falling asleep. I wasn't around to protect her. Tammy struggles a lot. I feel constant anger and anxiety when I look at her and see that she's not the same person. I see her physically and how well she healed, but I can't see her mentally. I know she's not okay. She knows she's not okay. She just holds it all in. It just kills me when I realize that it's hurting her so bad.
Well, Chris, let me just ask you straight up. Do you feel like you failed your wife?
Yes, for letting her go by herself. And not only that, but falling asleep.
Take me through the moment you saw her face for the first time.
She was so covered with blood, dried up blood, and it didn't look like her. I thought she was going to die right there.
And how do you feel when there's been conjecture that you did that to her?
It's just crazy. It makes me angry.
Was there any scam involved here in any way?
No. I mean, I would never choose to have myself beaten half to death and strangled unconscious twice. And basically, this man disposed of my body. He put me in that crawl space area with wastewater. That's not a scam.
Now, there have been statements made by the Dominican Republic law enforcement on June 3rd of this year. A police spokesman said, and these are just excerpts, a lot of conjecture about the case, a lot of information that doesn't match some of the statements. And on the next day, Dominican Republic Attorney General's office, rape kit came up negative. 6'5", the Putacana Tourism Police spokesman, incongruencies and discrepancies in statements made. Spokesperson from the Dominican Republic Attorney General's office, couple had not filed a complaint. Is that true?
No, it's not true. The thing that irritates me the most is the rape kit. They didn't do a rape kit when I first went into the hospital. It was 48 hours later after they told me to shower. And when they came in, it was an external swab. That was it. So there was no reason for a rape kit to come back positive with what they did. They disposed of my clothes. My clothes are all missing. And we testified in front of the judge, in front of the public defender and the prosecutor.
Well, how can they say you didn't file a complaint then?
I don't know.
Well, next, is there someone that saw something that could shed some light on this? We'll be right back.
I have issues with men behind me walking down corridors. I can hear his grunt when he hit me from behind. I think about it every waking minute.
It's season 18!
America's most watched daytime talk show.
You want us to keep our relationship private, but you can't even keep your privates private.
I'd just like to ask the audience,
no, you don't.
I'm here for my relationship, and nobody's letting me talk.
She'll be back. There's no way to get out over there.
I've had the privilege of performing more than 40,000 exorcisms. Yes, you will. No, I won't.
Doing an exorcism would be like me saying, you're depressed, let me do a lobotomy.
He's afraid of something, and I'll tell you what it is, it's me. Because I'm going to show his true colors. You watch. You're going to see it.
I'm a little afraid myself.
On the all-new season of Dr. Phil.
The resort where Tammy says her assault took place admits that the negative attention the island has since received forced them to close temporarily after thousands of reservations were canceled. Tammy says the physical scars from the attack, frankly, are nothing compared to the actual mental scars that haunt her every day.
When people look at me, they think I'm fine. They don't even know I went through this trauma. But my mind is another case. I've lost a piece of that. I suffer every day. I think about it every waking minute. I think about him hitting me, and I can hear his grunt when he hit me from behind. I also suffer from severe anxiety, PTSD. There's a lot of different triggers that will cause me to have anxiety or panic attacks. Walking down corridors, I have issues with men behind me. My head is constantly on a swivel, looking around, trying to see who's around me, who might come after me. My employer had to move me into an office so that my back was against the wall and I could see everybody coming towards me. I also struggle with guilt and shame. When he was strangling me, I gave up. I stopped fighting. Almost cost me my life. And my children would have had to grow up without a mother, and my husband would have had to bury me.
You know, you said it well, the physical scars do heal, but what's happened inside and the residual of this and the fear that it causes and the triggers that are left, I mean, those go on. Was there someone that may have seen something here?
Yes, a woman who stated that She was in that hallway at the time I was taken and had witnessed 2 men at the door. And when she walked by, she gave them a smile, and she said she actually feared for her life because of the looks that they gave her. And she went back to her room, and she jokingly told her husband, you know, I'm glad I'm fat and ugly, or I think they would have kidnapped me and threw me in that room.
I want to talk about some excerpts from the affidavit of the witness that you're talking about. She says, as I walked to the lounge, I passed the maintenance closet and noticed 2 males standing against the wall with the maintenance door propped open. The 2 men were wearing uniforms. As I walked past the 2 men, I felt afraid. I realized she was attacked shortly after I walked past that propped maintenance closet. So your sense and what she reports having seen are very consistent.
Supports it, yeah.
So that gives some information, but again...
Well, they found evidence where I was found. There was a mop handle, a mop. And when he was beating me, I thought he was using fists, but he was actually using the mop handle to beat me with a club, like a club. And there was blood all over the mop handle.
I talked about residual.
Yeah, I struggle every day. My mind, I can't turn off my mind. My mind goes to that situation, what happened, over and over and over again. It's like on a constant loop.
This can last forever if you don't do certain things to be free of it. And I want to talk about that with Son. I don't want to hurry that. Tammy wonders if she will ever be able to overcome all the feelings that she has. Shame, guilt, anxiety, fear, all the things that you can imagine you're left with after this. She can, but it takes some work. We're going to talk about it after the break. Well, I'm here with Tammy and Chris, and we're talking about what can happen mentally, emotionally, after going through a highly traumatic event. And in this case, that traumatic event is what Tammy has described as a brutal attack. You actually feared for your life. You thought you were dying at that point.
I did. I thought I was dying twice. When he was beating me, all I could think of was that he was going to bash my head in, and the horror of them finding me and my husband having to identify me.
Yeah.
And then the second time when he strangled me unconscious as I was losing consciousness, I thought about my kids and my husband and thought they'll never find me. And if they do, I felt so guilty because I laid there and let him do that to me.
When you get in a fight for your life, it's a win-lose. You either live or you die.
Right.
Did you live or did you die?
I lived.
So if you live, then
I won.
You won. You're here. You survived. You're still here. You're still here. And if you let that situation control you, then you're still there. I can't diagnose you sitting here. I would have to do a whole lot more than I can do in this period of time. But on the short list of considerations is that you are experiencing the aftermath of a very traumatic event, and you're describing a textbook scenario of post-traumatic stress syndrome. There's a place that I've worked with for years and years called Onsite, and it is just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and they do very intensive workshops, and some of them are specifically designed for people that have been through trauma. And I've talked to these folks and made arrangements for that to be available for both of you.
Great.
Because I think this is a walk that you could really benefit from taking together.
Yeah.
Because I think you're suffering very much as well.
Yes, I am.
I never disrupt ongoing therapy, so I would ask you to talk with your therapist about this, and if they have no objection to it, then I would highly recommend it. How does that sound to you?
Sounds really good. I would just like to be able to live and go day to day without thinking about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Now, to complete this loop, I want to say we reached out to local authorities in the Dominican Republic and the resort. The federal police and the tourism police issued a no comment. The resort was unavailable for comment at this time. And for the statement from the Minister of Tourism in the Dominican Republic, you can go to drphil.com. Next, we're going to meet Dawn. She says her husband is one of the 12 American tourists who have died in the Dominican Republic since June of 2018. She insists her husband did not die of natural causes. We're going to meet her after the break.
Dawn McCoy and her husband David Harris had gone to the Dominican Republic to celebrate their anniversary
when he suddenly became ill and died. Her husband's death was ruled a heart attack by authorities in the Dominican Republic, but she doesn't believe it.
There have been 12 reported American tourist deaths in the Dominican Republic since June 2018. 12. There have also been a steady stream of travelers claiming sudden illnesses while vacationing there. Now, this has some believing counterfeit alcohol may be to blame. Now, tragically, Dawn's husband, David, was one of those 12 deaths. Take a look.
Dawn McCoy and her 45-year-old husband, David, were spending a dream vacation in the Dominican Republic when he suddenly became ill and died.
Dawn McCoy and her husband David Harris had gone to the Dominican Republic to celebrate their anniversary. But this time, after heading back to his room, the 45-year-old Harris complained he felt terrible. He woke up in deep trouble.
It happened last July, but she's coming forward now after hearing about the deaths of 3 American tourists within 5 days. Her husband's death was ruled a heart attack by authorities in the Dominican Republic, but his wife told Inside Edition she doesn't believe it.
Despite her suspicion, McCoy never had a second autopsy on her husband in the U.S., and she had his body cremated. Now she thinks that was a big mistake.
Now, despite none of the dozen deaths or reported sicknesses having been ruled suspicious or due to tainted alcohol, Dawn claims her husband, David, in fact, was murdered.
In spite of what the coroner's report said, I don't believe my husband died of natural causes. He was murdered. On our 9th day, David had indicated that he wasn't feeling well. He went to the room and slept until 10 o'clock. I woke him up. He had a very strange smell. It was very pungent. I asked him to take a shower and to brush his teeth, and even after he did that, the smell was still there. I woke up about 5:20 to David trying to get out of bed. He was unable to talk. His skin was a pale yellowish color, and he was foaming at the mouth. I was terrified. I dialed the hotel operator immediately, begging for somebody to please come. My 12-year-old son tried to perform CPR on David because it was taking so long for the doctor to come. My son was telling me, Mommy, it's not working, it's not working. We were like, David, hang on, somebody's coming, please, just hang on. It took the doctor approximately 22 minutes to get to our room, and they had used a defibrillator on David. He was not moving. We arrived at the hospital approximately 1.5 hours after my initial call. The funeral director told me that David had passed. I was totally in shock. When I got the autopsy report, it had indicated that David had died of a heart attack. My husband was 45 years old and he was very healthy. David had no history of heart problems at all. I was very suspicious that they're trying to hide something. I'm going to get to the bottom of it and I will find out the truth.
I'm terribly sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I can't imagine being on vacation and...
Coming home a widow.
Yeah. You do not believe that your husband died of natural causes.
I don't.
Tell me what you do think happened.
Well, I believe that somebody murdered him, whether it was intentional or unintentional.
But you do know that 45-year-old, seemingly healthy men, in fact, do fall over and die. I'm not saying that's what happened with your husband, but we're going to put all of the possibilities on the table. That does happen.
Most of the people that are dying all have one common denominator, and that's pulmonary edema.
Joining us now is Dr. Joel Kahn. Now, Dr. Kahn serves as the clinical professor of cardiology at the Wayne State University School of Medicine, and he is the founder of the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity. So, Dr. Kahn, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Walk us through what's here on the autopsy report and what you conclude from looking at this.
David had an enlarged heart. Now, we do know he was on blood pressure medicine, but more significantly, one of the 3 major heart arteries to his muscle of his heart was said to be obstructed, the right coronary artery, having caused a heart attack on the bottom of the heart and leading to damage. And in fact, that kind of heart attack on the bottom of the heart can mimic a whole lot of other conditions that don't present rather classically with the crushing elephant on the chest. In fact, so much of what it is reported in the hours before he died do match very closely.
Okay, I'm going to ask Dawn what she thinks about this right after the break. Well, I'm back with Dawn, and we've been talking to a very noted cardiologist, Dr. Kahn, and on autopsy, they reported finding that he did have obstruction and that his heart was enlarged, and those symptoms were consistent. Symptoms that are consistent with that kind of problem are what you reported on the evening that he died.
Right.
And that's why I asked Dr. Kahn to come here. What do you think about that?
I don't know. This is something I wasn't expecting, so I don't know what to think.
Is it possible that this is what killed your husband?
Up until 2 minutes ago, I would say no.
Yeah.
I don't know what to actually think right now. I feel like if you have a heart attack, you have symptoms that come on other than an upset stomach. I've never heard of a heart attack starting with an upset stomach or having diarrhea. I've never heard of that.
This does happen, and it probably was a heart attack, and we have to accept that and get our heads around it. And because until you do that, you're going to be on task, on an investigation, on a crusade, and as long as you're doing that, you're not grieving. Grief is not a mental illness. It's a process you go through, but if you're having trouble getting started in it or getting through it, then we'll provide help with that. Just know that, okay?
Okay.
All right. Now, we reached out to the resort where Dawn's husband passed away for a statement. They said, no comment. Coming up, we'll meet a young woman who thought she had the flu, but it turned out to be a nearly fatal disease. Her amazing story of survival next. Do you ever feel sick and think it's the flu? Well, my next guest had exactly that feeling, but the next day wound up hospitalized. She later learned she had contracted meningitis. Now, in order to save her life, doctors had to amputate her legs below the knee and her fingers. Now, some of the images may be disturbing. Here's Jamie's remarkable story.
When I was 20 years old, I was attending my dream university. One night, came down with flu-like symptoms. I was cold, shivering to the bone. The next morning, I was so weak, I could barely walk. I needed to go to the hospital. I had no idea that would have been the last time I walked with my natural-born legs. The nurse in the emergency room suspected what was later confirmed, that I contracted meningitis.
As a mom, it was the hardest thing watching her fight for her life.
I saw my limbs go from red to purple to black to literally rotting. All of my fingers and legs below the knees were amputated to help stop the spread of the disease.
While Jamie may be missing limbs, I'm certainly fortunate to have my daughter here with me today.
Usually people pick up things that they're opening, but I have to use surfaces to help me open it. Learning things a new way actually made me this really determined, adaptive person. All of my earrings are hooks because it's the only type of jewelry I can put in by myself. Today, I'm a woman living life to the fullest, and I found love along the way. I feel that the best is yet to come.
Well, Jamie joins me along with Dr. Lynn Friedland, pediatrician and vaccine research scientist at pharmaceutical company GSK, who we're partnering with today. Now, also joining us in the audience is Jamie's mother, Patsy. So welcome. Glad to have you here. Now, Jamie, had you ever heard of meningitis before your diagnosis?
No, it was the scariest experience.
Now, we saw how the disease turned your limbs black. What were you feeling at that point?
An excruciating amount of pain. And I felt like I had thousands of pounds of sand on me. After 2 months of being in the hospital, the doctor started to talk about amputations. Wow. And they decided to amputate my limbs to help stop the spread of the disease.
Wow. So, Patsy, as a mother, how did you handle Jamie's diagnosis? Had to be shocking.
Well, I was shocked, and it was pretty devastating. Jamie's my young, vibrant, healthy child.
Yeah. So, Dr. Friedland, talk about what meningitis really is.
Jamie had invasive meningococcal disease, commonly referred to as meningitis. It can cause inflammation of the protective membranes that surround the brain and the spinal cord. It can also cause blood poisoning with sepsis. Now, there are 5 vaccine-preventable groups, A, C, W, Y, and B. Early symptoms can be similar to a mild case of the flu, but as we saw with Jamie, this can progress very rapidly. Meningitis is uncommon, but it's potentially fatal.
Right.
1 in 10 will die, sometimes within 24 hours. And of those who survive, 1 in 5 suffer long-term consequences, such as loss of limbs, like Jamie.
So who is most at risk of being infected?
Well, anybody can get meningitis, but teenagers and young adults have higher rates of infection with meningitis group B. For college students, there are increased risks. That includes living in close quarters, sharing things like food and drinks, and kissing. In fact, from 2011 through March of this year, meningitis B caused all U.S. college meningococcal outbreaks, and that involved 13 college campuses, 50 cases, 2 deaths, among an at-risk population of about 253,000 students.
So, Doctor, what can parents do to help protect their teens and young adults?
What parents can do is they can speak to their teen's doctor and ask about the 2 different types of vaccines that are available and needed to help protect against vaccine-preventable meningitis due to groups A, C, W, Y, and B before their teenager heads off to college. Now, vaccination may not protect everybody, but it can help save lives.
Jamie, you not only survived meningitis, you have a whole new life path.
With my mother, we are GSK spokespeople, and we're advocates for the meningitis vaccines. We want to help other families avoid this. After my amputations, I wasn't even sure if I was going to walk again.
Yeah. But not only are you walking again, but you also went on to become a competitive cyclist, right?
I did, and I have a gold medal to prove it.
Well, congratulations on that. This is amazing. Parents, I just have to say, it is imperative that you take this very, very seriously. Get educated about meningitis vaccinations. And a great place to start is at meningitisb.com. And talk to your teen's doctor about the 2 different types of meningitis vaccines. It's really important that you ask these questions. This doesn't just happen to other people. take the precautions. I want to thank all of my guests today, especially Dr. Lynn Friedland. And Jamie, you are an absolute inspiration, turning this into something positive. So
Thank you for
God
having
bless
me.
you for doing that. If you have a story or life situation that you need my help, I want to hear from you. Just email me at drphil.com. Tell me all about it. And if you're in the Los Angeles area, we'd love to see you here in our studio audience. The tickets are free, and all the details are on my website. And be sure to subscribe to my podcast, Fill in the Blanks, and my crime podcast, Mystery and Murder Analysis by Dr. Phil. We'll see you next time.